The biggest mistake I've ever made, and this isn't necessarily in trading, the biggest mistake I've ever made in life is being distracted.
Hey trader, welcome back to Top Tier Interview. My name is Brittany Hughes and I am here with someone that you will know definitely. This is Josh Pavao. He is a coach within the Top Tier community. If you're in Discord, if you're on our Instagram, you've definitely seen his face before. So welcome to Interviews, Josh.
Thank you, Brittany. I'm happy to be here.
How are you?
I am fantastic.
Yeah?
Yep.
I'm excited to get into it. I mean, again, seeing your face and seeing you heavily involved within the Top Tier community, I see one aspect of you, and that's coach.
Yeah.
And I'm excited to get to know you a little bit more, hear a bit more about your story and kind of what's led you to this position.
Well, I hope I can fulfill that expectation with an interesting story.
No pressure. But I want to get into what you were what life was like before trading, before you really dove into this world. What were you doing before you even discovered what trading was?
So immediately, I mean, it depends on how far back you wanted to go, but immediately before I got into trading, I was a police officer in South Florida for 6.5 years.
Okay.
Yep. That's
Wow.
what made me move to Miami.
Okay. You had you wanted to be within the force?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. So when I was quick, 2-second backtrack, when I was 19, I joined the Army. I was in the military for 6 years. From there, I'm from Boston originally. So from there, I went from the Army into corrections. So I worked in a maximum security prison for 4.5 years, and it was pretty miserable. But while I was there, I ended up speaking to a guy who told me, he's like, hey, I used to work for Fort Lauderdale Police. It was awesome. You should go check it out. I came down here, I did a ride along, and I fell in love with South Florida. So over the next year or so, I was just saving up. I ended up quitting there. I came down here for law enforcement, and that's what moved me to Miami.
Cool. What was
into trade? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna ask. How was that experience? What was that experience like?
Which one?
Being a law enforcement in Miami.
Honestly, I would say that I experienced more when it comes to experience and dealing with things. I think I experienced a lot more when I worked in the prison, more than anything else. Because it's a completely different world. Like most people probably don't understand how different it is behind a prison wall. The day-to-day as a police officer, it's really 1% of the time shit hits the fan, you know. But for the most part, it's nothing crazy. You just have to, I think working in the prison actually prepped me for being a police officer, because one thing I noticed when I was working in law enforcement was that a lot of the kids who came in, I say kids, but kids who started as a police officer 21, 22 years old that didn't have life experience, they didn't have conversational or communication skills. They would just almost be too assertive, and that's what got them into a lot of physical trouble with other people on the street, and that's where there were problems. But having the experience of working in a prison, I didn't have a weapon. I had my voice and communication for 4.5 years, and I was dealing with some of the most violent people in the state. So when you have to convince someone that you want something, you have to learn how to use your words appropriately. So I think that benefited me the most. But as far as experience goes, I think a lot of it was behind the wall more than anything else.
Wow.
That shaped who I am today, more than the military, more than the police department.
And would you say that what you learned from that time, have you been able to transfer that kind of into what you're doing right now?
I'm sure there are character traits that have transferred over to specifically say learning how to defend myself or speak, or it's hard to say that translates specifically into trading. I think the character trait of discipline, the character trait of self-awareness, stuff like that is very helpful when it comes to trading. I don't know if that's from what I did in the past in my career, or if that's just something I've developed as I've grown as a person. So it's hard to correlate the two.
Yeah, hard to decipher.
Yeah.
When was your first exposure to trading?
To trading. So after a couple of years of being down here, literally my first year working in law enforcement, I like to look at the guys who were a couple of years ahead of me. So I talked to a guy in the police department who was 15 years ahead, and he was complaining about trying to purchase a house that cost $300K. And I was looking at this and I'm like, this is my future. This is depressing. So long story short, immediately after I got into the police department, I started looking around and I'm like, I didn't realize there's a life so much bigger, because when you move to Miami, I have friends driving $500,000 cars to the gym. not even thinking about it. And when I'm going to work, these guys are complaining about buying a house. And I'm like, there's something to this. I need to get into this entrepreneurship thing. So long story short, 4 or 5 businesses, 5 years later, I ended up opening a boxing gym in Miami. The boxing gym's still open now, but my partnership as of now is separated from there. While I was opening, we opened our second location. One of the guys I signed up was a trader, or he said he was a trader. He was driving the Lamborghini. I'm signing him up for the boxing gym that we just opened, and he's bragging about how he just made $300,000 in 1 month and that he teaches people what he does. At this time, I literally had no idea what Forex was. I didn't know, I've never even heard the word. But obviously, what he told me how much he made and how easy he made it sound attracted me to it. And then he was like, hey, I do a free class. Come by. Let me show you what this is. So I went to the class. At the same time, my partnership with the boxing gym was kind of going sideways. I didn't like the people they were affiliating with, so I was like getting away from it. I was still working in law enforcement at the time. I was working overnights and doing the business stuff during the day, trying to quit the police department. So.
And what year was this?
It was COVID time, so 2020.
Okay.
Give or take around
Sure.
there. Yeah. And I went to the class. He got me enough interested into what trading was. Fast forward a couple months, I had paid him a couple $1,000s, found out he was a scammer. The car wasn't even his. The penthouse he lived in was under someone else's name. But thankfully, I'm stubborn enough that it got me interested that I kind of went on my own to just figure it out. Mm-hmm. But that was my introduction to Forex.
Okay. And then although unfortunately that transpired into him not being someone that you can trust to learn from, how did you go about actually learning then, if the person that you were exposed to turned out to be a bit of a fraud?
So I think I went to the same thing that most people go to originally, and it's YouTube. It's trying to find a strategy that works on social media, trying to find somebody who looks profitable, going through signal groups from other people and seeing what works and what doesn't. And the first, I would say 4-5 months was just ping-ponging back and forth between finding something that made sense. And eventually I found what made sense. And it was, once again, it was kind of through YouTube, but it was more through like just research on understanding how the markets work, really, more than finding any specific strategy. Okay. I've kind of developed my own now, but I didn't reinvent the wheel on how I trade now.
Okay.
Yeah.
So has your strategy from the time you started to learn a few years ago to now, has that shifted or changed or evolved, or what you started to learn in the very beginning is what you apply now when you're trading?
Everything I learned the very beginning, no. Everything I learned in the very beginning, I've scratched literally all of it.
Okay.
But I would say 4 or 5 months in, basically it's called, the way that I trade is called fundamentals, or like one of the things that I pay attention to is called fundamentals. Has my strategy changed or what I pay attention to changed? No, but my experience has increased. Mm-hmm. So, for example, like we just had now, depending on the time someone is watching this, we just had the Israeli war that passed on October 6th was when it was announced over the weekend. I knew exactly what was going to happen to the markets because I was trading during the Russia-Ukraine war and I was paying attention to the war, so I knew how the market's going to react. But my first time trading during the Russia-Ukraine war, I got my ass kicked because the markets, I was trying to pay attention and seeing what was going to happen, and I didn't blow any accounts or anything like that, but I gained a lot of experience. So my strategy hasn't changed, but my experience on different events that happen in the markets and how the markets react to them has increased.
Okay, and I want to get a little bit granular with you because you are a coach within the top tier community. What strategy have you found to be the most profitable for yourself, and the one that is like your tried and true? What are you looking for when you are looking to take a trade?
I break it down into what I believe would be the simplest way. Okay. I call it the FIST framework. So I didn't invent this, but the FIST framework I did kind of coin as my own framework that I use. But FIST is an acronym, so it stands for fundamental analysis is the first one. Fundamental analysis can be broken down into monetary policy, central banks, stuff like that, like the Federal Reserve, interest rates and stuff like that. The second thing for fundamental analysis would also be geopolitical events, Russia-Ukraine war, the Israeli war, stuff like that. The I in FIST, the FIST framework, is intermarket analysis. The way that applies to the markets is that if you're trading anything, the US dollar, for example, is going to impact other things in the markets. The markets are not a zero-sum game where if, like, there's one of these things, it's kind of one of my pet peeves where someone says, like, oh, the market's tanked. And I'm like, what does that mean? Because when something drops, something else went up. The markets never just move. Like, there's no such thing to me as the markets. It's like you have currencies, you have equities, you have commodities, gold, oil, copper. There's so many different things. So the dollar will impact gold in a different way that it'll impact something like the bonds or NASDAQ or US 30. There's so many different things. So when you understand intermarket analysis, I understand how inflation expectations are going to impact interest rates, which is going to impact gold, which is going to impact the dollar, vice versa. So intermarket analysis is basically understanding how the markets are connected. Then the third thing is sentiment analysis. Sentiment is, if you were to look up the definition of sentiment, it just means emotion. So it's very hard to translate this for most people on when you're talking about emotions in the markets, but there is emotions in the markets. It's called market optimism, market fear. Some people refer to it as risk on, risk off. But an example of this would be, once again, the Russia-Ukraine war. If you go look at the markets then, the reactions in the markets were very similar to what happened in the Israel war. It's called market fear. If you go look at what happened during the Israeli war, and then you go look at what happened to the markets when Silicon Valley Bank failed. I don't know if you remember, there was a bank run. Yeah. So when that happened, the markets reacted the same way because there was recessionary fears. A U.S. bank had a bank run. That's a big fucking deal.
Yeah.
So when you understand sentiment analysis, what causes market optimism, market fear, you can essentially understand the direction of the market, right? So fundamentals, number one, intermarket analysis, sentiment analysis, and then T is just technicals. It's where you take your entries, using good risk. Technicals for me, in its most simple form, is just finding an entry and using good risk management, setting your stop loss, and understanding market structure.
Wow. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but there's no way you learned all of this from a YouTube video.
No, I've learned that from experience and getting my ass kicked.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. And I mean, I think one of the most important elements of that, of what you just said, of getting my ass kicked and then learning, is being able to bring that self-awareness in of, okay, where did I go wrong? How can I learn from this quote unquote loss or lesson, or however you want to frame it, and now turn it into an advantage, which it sounds like you've done.
Yep.
Now I know, and you know, we both know that trading isn't something that you learn one day. Maybe you get thrown around in the markets and then you learn from that, and then it's uphill from there. And I use this analogy all the time, and I'm going to keep using it because I feel like it's a really good indication of someone's trading journey, especially at the beginning. And I like to use the analogy of going to college and how they say, give it 4 years at least to get your ass kicked, 1. 2, to learn from those things and to be able to implement them. So I kind of break it down in a freshman year. Maybe you're hitting a streak of luck, but ultimately you don't really know what you're doing. You're losing more than you're winning. And what you are winning, again, it's just coming down to maybe a bit of luck. Sophomore year, you understand that, okay, this isn't a get rich overnight, a get rich quick. I'm actually going to have to apply myself to learning an actual skill set. Junior year, you are adopting those skill sets of, mindset, psychology, fundamentals. You are aware of them, you are adopting them, and then senior year, their habit, hopefully at that point, they've been adopted, and now you're reaching, profitability. You said in 2020, around that time, you were at that point where you learned from someone that ended up not being someone that you could trust and learn from. How long would you say were you and did you even experience kind of this analogy of being in your freshman year, moving through that into your sophomore year? And what were some of those times that you can kind of draw back on of like, okay, that was a loss that turned into a lesson that then I learned from to be as knowledgeable as you are now?
So the self-awareness thing is the biggest thing that is what helped me become profitable. But one of the things I like to say when it comes to like analogies and talking about learning how to trade is a lot of people, and this is going to be kind of controversial because I know a lot of people don't trade the same way that I do, or they don't pay it. A lot of people generally like to say, like, I stay away from the news. I don't trade fundamentals. They don't do any of that stuff. I'm the complete opposite, and I'm a hardcore, like, you're gambling if you don't do this type thing. But when it comes to, like, understanding technicals, you can learn technicals and how to read a chart in a month. Like, the basics, theory, you can learn that in a month. In my opinion, if you're only looking at technicals and you're doing that for 4 years, you're freshman, sophomore, junior, senior year, and that's all you're doing, you haven't learned anything since month one. You've learned nothing new because you're still just looking at the same candlesticks, randomly moving up and down in the chart, and you have no idea what's making it move, why it's moving, or what's happening. So when it comes to, like, the learning curve, for me, it took 8 months before I was consistent. My first 4 months was not understanding anything. I watched one video on gold. It was a video on gold, and someone was explaining how inflation and interest rates impact gold. That was the first opening of Pandora's box for me when I was like, oh, there's something else that impacts the markets. Like, I didn't know this because I've never seen this explained anywhere before. Once I learned that, it was all over. I just became a student of that, and then 3 or 4 months of that, I became consistent. But to your point, it was like, I have a trading journal that I use religiously for 8 months, and I still have it to this day because I still show it to people sometimes on my computer. I used to journal every single trade I took, every single trade I missed, what made the move happen, what headlines, what news, what data came out, and I would backtest all of it. Or not backtest it, I would journal it at the end of every single day, every day, for 8 months. That self-awareness is what gained me the experience that I have now. That gives me a little more of a macro perspective of the markets, if that makes sense. Like, for example, when it comes to trading, like, inflation data, inflation only comes out once a month. So it's like, if you want that experience or if you want to get good at it, the way that you learn it is to do it. But if you're going to trade it and you just, like, if I just traded inflation data today and then say I take a loss, or say I win, but I don't really know what happened, I don't know why it moved the way it did, I took a win, and then I move on to inflation data next month, but I don't remember what happened, there's no way I can replicate the same thing.
Yeah.
But when you pay attention to this stuff, you'll notice in data, central bank statements, monetary policies, economic events, there are patterns. And when you can identify those patterns, you know how currencies will react, how commodities like gold will react, and indices, US 30 and stuff will react. I know I got kind of sidetracked, but I hope I answered a little bit of the question.
Yeah, you did. I mean, ultimately, I'm also interested to know where are you getting your information from? Now, I know there's different websites that I feel like are tailored specifically to traders to get news information, and it's easily digestible. But for me, let's say I'm going to Forex Factory and I'm looking at a little blurb of what's taking place at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, and as someone who I can't read the blurb and fully understand what's going on.
Yep.
Where do I go to get this, like, more in-depth information?
So my information, if you were someone as a trader, if you were a brand new trader and you came to me and asked that question, as like an unfiltered plug, I would say you should just come trade live with us because we trade live in my community and I'll answer all those questions, right? But the way that I do it as a professional trader doing this on my own, I use a news terminal. So it's the company that I use, it's called Reuters. It's a Reuters news terminal. Bloomberg also has one too. It's not free and it's not cheap, which is why most people don't use it and most people don't invest in it, because you have to see the value in something like that first before you take the investment into getting something like that. But the news terminal gives me minute by minute, second by second headlines. For example, if Biden was speaking right now, or if Putin is speaking while I'm trading, I'm literally watching the headlines on my monitor as he's speaking in real time. And then 2 hours later, the TV and the news is talking about Putin said this and Biden said that. But the market's already reacted to this because when the headlines come out, the market movers, if you will, the whales, whatever you want to call them, they have the information probably faster than even I have it in my terminal. So the markets react almost immediately. By the time it's actually on Bloomberg or somewhere that's a free resource, that move has already come and gone and the markets have already reacted to it. So for me, it's a news terminal. It's having access to that.
Okay. So do you pay closer attention to headlines, the news, the things that you're reading, or do you also pay close attention to trading sessions and time of day and things of that sort? And I guess which one do you pay attention to more? And is there a way to infuse both of them?
Yeah, well, they all they all kind of correlate. So they all do work together. The markets are open, 24 hours a day, right? There are going to be times where headlines come out that it's not a typical time that I'm trading or I'm looking for trades, but the markets will still react. For example, the Russia-Ukraine war was announced at like 8 p.m. on a Wednesday, February 23rd. I just remember it because Wednesdays used to be my date night, and I wasn't on the computer, but I have my newsfeed connected to my phone and my Apple Watch, and I saw the headline. All of the markets reacted. That's not a typical time I'd be on the computer looking for trades. It's Asian session. There's low volume. I'm not doing that. But if a headline comes out from somebody important and it's going to impact the markets don't care about what time it is. It doesn't matter. But typically speaking, the headlines that do come out is normally during trading hours, but it's never guaranteed. You don't know when a political speaker or a central bank speaker will come out and say something. And if they say something important, like if the chair of the Federal Reserve, his name's Jerome Powell, like if he came out right now and it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon and he's like, hey, we're going to start cutting rates because inflation's fine. We're going to cut rates. The markets aren't going to wait until New York session tomorrow. The market's going to react right now.
Right then and there.
Yep.
Yeah, which of course makes complete sense.
Yeah.
When you first started out trading and implementing, the importance of all of the fundamentals that you just went into detail about as well, alongside your technical in terms of, entries, exits, whatever the case may be, were you trading on your personal account?
Yes.
Okay, and how long was that time period from trading on your personal account to then discovering prop firms?
The very first account that I took a trade on was a prop firm.
Okay.
But when I got into fundamentals, I was trading a personal account. I had failed a prop firm, I think twice, and then I got funded once. Didn't last very long. And then that's when I was like, something's got to give. And that's when I started with fundamentals. And since then I've just kind of been growing and scaling and doing my own stuff with my own account.
Okay.
Yeah, but I knew about prop firms before I get started. It was the first thing that was introduced to me.
Oh, that's very interesting because I feel like the sentiment is normally the opposite of like, I didn't even know prop firms existed for X amount of time. And then once I discovered them, I was like, oh, great, look at this tool. But the first trade you ever took was on a prop firm account.
Yep.
Interesting.
Which I would highly advise somebody not to do now.
Yeah, and why?
Yeah.
Why?
Because you don't have a skill yet to become, like, if you haven't developed a skill and you're not profitable, you shouldn't be taking challenges to hope your strategy works. You should have a strategy and know that you can be profitable before you start taking challenges, because even if you do for some reason get funded and you pass a challenge, what are the odds that you're going to keep it? You're just kind of flipping a coin hoping that you still know what you're doing, when most likely the first trade that you took that got you to pass was a lucky over-leveraged trade that got you to pass. And I see that time and time again. So I would advise against that. I look back at what I did and I was like, man, that was dumb, but it was preached to me like, this is a blessing. You should take advantage of this. And I think from a psychological perspective, it's not, I won't say it's not a good thing, but I think it's an added challenge if you don't have a strategy down yet or your psychology down yet.
Of course, yeah, because you are required to stay within a certain
someone else's rules,
some parameters, which I think pros and cons to everything. I think it's such an advantage, especially for beginner traders, because it forces you to follow rules. Because for a lot of traders, myself included, when you're first getting started out, you maybe have some loose rules, but it's very easy to break those rules because you're the one who has set those rules into place.
Yeah.
Whereas with a prop firm that has a certain guideline that you have to stay within, otherwise you will lose your challenge. I think it, again, invites you or forces you to adopt some better habits than maybe you would not have if you just had the free reins to do whatever you want, however you wanted, and to trade however you wanted.
Yeah, I can see that. And I've spoken to people who say, like, I like it because it gives me parameters.
Okay.
I say a lot of controversial things, so this will probably be a little more controversial.
Yeah, let's hear it.
But this is the way that I think about it. Whenever I ask somebody, I'm like, what's your goal with trading? Like, why did you get into trading? The answer is always relatively similar. Financial success, financial freedom. I want to quit my job. I want to retire my family. I want to help my wife, my girlfriend, my kids, whatever it is. Mm-hmm. When somebody comes up to me and they're like, I keep over trading. I keep breaking my rules. I keep doing this. And then I ask them, I'm like, well, what are your goals with trading? And then they say, oh, I want this audacious. I want to go buy the Lamborghini cash. I want this house. I want to buy my mama a house. And I'm like, every single time you break that rule, you're saying, fuck you to that future self. So every time you think about that 5-year future version of yourself and you're breaking your own rule, your actions contradict whatever the hell you're saying your goals are. So like, why do you need someone? And I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I understand how people need that, but I'm always like, maybe I just have a different perspective on this where I'm just like, I'm not breaking my own rules because my rules is what's going to get me to my goal, right? So I can't sit here and say like, oh, I can't wait to have a 6-pack. I can't wait to be shredded and go to the beach and then look at that pizza and then just start eating pizza and being like, oh, I can't believe I'm not shredded yet. Like, you're not going to be profitable or consistent if you're breaking all of these so-called rules and you're letting everybody else around you down. You're letting yourself down. You're letting your future self down. You're letting your kids down. Whatever it is that your goals are, you're telling them that you don't care about those goals. That's the way that I look at it, at least.
And I mean, that's, I think, the way to look at it, right?
It's having a longer term perspective instead of like the in the now, I need to make money now, 30-day payout. Like, and there's nothing wrong with that. Yeah. But it's like the short term thinking versus like, I'm in this for the long game. Like, and it took me a little while to realize that. But when I know people who are billionaires from trading currencies. So why am I worried about a quick payout today if the markets don't look right? Why am I worried about forcing trades and over leveraging and over trading and doing all this shit when I know people who have done this for 20 years and they own a 300-foot yacht that they paid cash for? I'm like, there are levels to this.
Absolutely. Have you always thought that way?
I don't think so. I think I've developed it over time.
Okay. I'm interested to know what's contributed to that mindset, because I think for a lot of people, like, ideally, yes, if I do this, this will result in this, right? In terms of, if I break my rule, I am disappointing my future self. I'm putting myself one step backwards versus I can be taking one step forward every time I abide by the rules that I set for myself. And I'm human, and I think human behavior is knowing what you should do and then having the choice to either do that thing that you know you should do or choosing what's comfortable in the moment, what's comfortable now. And what, for me personally, because I have a similar mindset towards you in terms of if I just do what I'm supposed to do, I will eventually get to where I desire to be. But that's come from doing the opposite. That's come from experience in, I say that I want to, become an entrepreneur. And that means I have to do certain tasks every day, tasks that I want to do and tasks that ultimately I just don't really want to do, but I know this is something that needs to be done in order to get myself to that point.
Yep.
But it's come from me getting so sick and tired of saying that I'm going to do something and not doing it and not following through, that like my life experience has showed me, okay, now I know that if I continue to not abide by my rules or not follow through on my word, that I'm not going to get to where I want to be. Now I know that. But so my life experience has showed me that. So I'm interested, and that's why I asked, have you always had this mindset, or was it life experience or something in specific that was like a light bulb moment for you in order to gain that really, powerful mindset?
So I think the coolest thing about, I guess, I want to say society or technology today is that I can steal that life experience from other people. So I am brutally focused at all times in, have you ever heard of the universal laws?
Yes.
So I'm a huge proponent of the law of exposure. And the law of exposure states, for those who don't know, once exposed to something, you cannot be unexposed. And every time I expose myself to the next level, whether that be mindset or financial or relationships, whatever it is, I automatically start to see where I am at currently as like I don't want to say nothing as if like I don't care, but I see a different level. So when it comes to adopting that mindset, I'm very what's the word? I don't want to say stubborn, but I'm very intentional about paying to be around people who are further ahead than me. And that's not necessarily in trading, because those people are very difficult to get in touch with. When you're talking about like the real people who are big in the game, like the Ken Griffin who owns Citadel and he manages $250 billion, like Ray Dalio, like these guys who are in the billions, you can't just
Call them up.
hit them up on Instagram.
Yeah.
But from an entrepreneurship perspective, I do everything I can to get involved in masterminds and learn from people who have sold their businesses for multiple 7, 8, 9 figures. And a lot of them over time, I also read a lot, but you take nuggets, and over time, those bricks and those nuggets become a foundation for something for you to build upon your own life. One of the things that, as you were talking, came to my mind is like, when it comes to, and this I got from Andy Frisella. I was in his mentorship group. I don't know if you know who Andy is, but
I'm not sure.
He's in the fitness industry, but
Okay.
mindset entrepreneurship industry, but he has a group called Arete Syndicate, and I was in that for a while. He says something that has always stuck with me. This is like 4 or 5 years ago. And the idea that where you are today is the result of actions that you took 6 months ago. Regardless of how you look at it, if you look at yourself naked in the mirror, it's because of things you were doing 6 months ago, not what you did yesterday. So if you can take that forethought and think about what you're doing today and realize that it's going to impact your future in the next 6 months, it will get you to take the correct action today to put you in that place in 6 months. So it makes sense looking backwards where you're like, oh man, I live here because things I did 6 months ago, maybe 12 months ago, but the idea is still the same regardless of the timeline. So if you can think with that forethought, I think it's not something I've developed on my own. It's something I've developed from looking at the guys who are 20 years ahead of me, listening to them, and then being like, okay, that's the mindset I need. They're in a different space. They're not trading. They're not in finance. But I think the mindset of an entrepreneur applies to trading 100%.
Yeah, 1,000% ultimately. Yeah. And I want to draw out a little bit of what you've just shared in terms of the idea of looking back 6 months and seeing maybe what you were doing then and then seeing where you are now, and accounting your past actions to what brought you to this moment in time. And I think what's really very, 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 very important there, especially when it comes to trading and the importance of documenting and a trading journal, and to be able to document these things, right? I'm such an avid component of journaling in my personal life, which has then transferred into my my trading career, because I've developed the habit of journaling for like 10 years at this point. And I have these physical journals that I can go back and read. And I do this every time I move houses or apartments. And I just kind of open them up and I see like what was I writing about 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago?
Yep.
And it's insane in terms of writing these things down and the state that I was in, and then looking at now, and then being able to kind of look around myself and be like, what I was journaling about back then and the actions that I was taking back then ultimately led me to this point in time. So I urge you, if you're someone that doesn't keep either a personal journal or a trading journal, whatever the case may be, if you're actually journaling the actions that you're taking and course correcting and learning from the losses and turning them into lessons and allowing those to be your advantages, it just makes why you are where you are. If you're not doing those things, if you're not taking the action every single day and you're still wondering why you're not making progress, at least, like, forget about, making it to your end goal or end destination. If you're at least not making progress, you can then account for, all of the action that you didn't take.
Yep. The word progress is one of my favorite words in life.
Why is that?
Because that's all I care about.
Okay.
I don't care about comparing myself to other people. I don't care about how far ahead somebody else is. I don't care about how slow I'm moving. I just care about being directionally correct in the path that I'm trying to go. So it's like, as long as I'm making progress every single day, it will stack up. Like I kind of stole this from somebody else, but there's a guy named Rob Bailey, also in the fitness industry, and he has a slogan for one of his apparel companies. It's progress over everything. And I used to write that down all the time because it's one of my favorite sayings. You just focus on progress. To your point, though, on the journaling thing, I think it's worth, like, I wanted to ask you, did you learn anything about yourself as you were journaling?
1,000%.
Yeah, because one thing on that is, like, when you relate trading, and I never thought of it this way until I talked to somebody else about it. When you talk about personal journaling or when you talk about trading journal, a lot of people think of journaling as like, oh, it's feminine and I'm not going to do that and my feelings and this and that. And it's like, you learn so much, like there's no denying the fact that people are emotionally attached to making money or losing money, especially in trading, because it happens so fast when you're day trading. So you have to be aware and you have to face those emotions and those actions that you take when you're trading unobjectively. Meaning, like, one of the biggest things that I see with people is, because I don't do it as much anymore, but I would do one-on-ones with a lot of the people in, like, my private community. Okay. But I would tell them to journal the same way that I would do it. And I'd be looking at their stuff and they're like, I can't believe I took this trade. I'm better than this. And they're like beating themselves up. But it's like, no, you need to look at your journal as a way to get better, not to beat yourself up. No judgment attached to the journal. I took this trade. This is why I took it. Probably a bad entry. This is what I could have done better. And then take a screenshot of how the market's actually played out and be like, this would have been a better entry. Now I know that. And over time, you do that for 8 months, every day, 1 year. You have an encyclopedia of 10 months of good trades and bad trades and things that happened. And it's a game changer that people, I think, just don't take advantage of. And it's not even something you have to pay for. I use Evernote. It's a free software that you can just screenshot TradingView and just put it in there. Yeah. Super simple.
I want to go back a little bit because you mentioned in terms of, again, accounting for the action that you didn't take and having to overcome certain things. I want to know, what was your biggest, I don't even want to say mistake, but maybe the biggest loss you took, the biggest mistake that you have made in your trading career, and kind of how you recorrected that.
The biggest mistake I took. I'm not a fan of talking about losses. Biggest loss I ever took, I think, 10 grand probably. I haven't taken many losses bigger than that now, and profits are much larger. But when it comes to mistakes with trading, I'm not perfect. So I know this sounds, this is weird for me to struggle with coming up with an answer, because I've never, even when it comes to, like, when I'm just thinking, speaking out loud, but, like, even when it comes to, like, the boxing gym that I was a part of, I could look back at that and be like, oh, it was a mistake to partner with them because this, that, and the other, and, like, it was bad. But that's what got me introduced to the guy that got me into trading. And then when I think about the boxing gym, I'm like, I got introduced to him because I used to own a supplement company. I launched the supplement company right before COVID, and obviously a bad idea. All the gyms shut down. So it's like, I look at that, I'm like, that could have been a mistake. But the supplement company got me introduced to the boxer who I partnered with, which opened up. So I'm like, I look at everything and I'm like, you can't align the stars looking forward. You can only align them looking backwards. It's from Steve Jobs. That's not my quote. But the idea, when I look back at, like, my trading journey personally, I've always been an advocate of learning more, a student of the game, journaling, getting better. So I've never looked at a loss as a mistake. I've always made them back up. I'm going deeper and deeper into the industry, into the game as much as I can. I don't look at any of it as mistakes.
I love that. Yeah. I love that. Let me reframe it as well, because we were talking about journaling, and for me, something that came up, I noticed after journaling for X amount of months and then going back, I recognized that there was, like, an underlying energy of fear, of I am closing out too early because I'm fearful that price is going to reverse. I'm not taking the trade at all because I am fearful that my analysis isn't correct. And so I'm not going to put as large of a position as I know that I can, because if something happens, then whatever, I won't be able to handle that emotionally. Yeah. Or if I'm in a trade, I have anxiety because, again, of these if scenarios. Yeah. So for you, were there any, like, underlying messages that you noticed while you were journaling that you were able to kind of reflect back on and overcome in a way?
Millions. Like, I think everything you mentioned, I've done.
Okay.
I think everybody does that. I think I still have days that I do that.
Yeah.
There are times where I go break even too early and I shouldn't. There are times when I close too early and I shouldn't. And once again, it's like I can spend all day staring at the charts and be like, damn, I can't believe gold took off. I was in those buys and I closed too early. Or I can look back and be like, you know what? This is what impacted the markets. This is what made it go further. I know next time. I know what happened. And like, that's kind of what I've always been doing. I think over managing trades, involving your emotions in the trades, I think that's always going to be a factor. When you can focus, just my opinion, when you can focus on just progress as opposed to being right, I don't care about having to be right. I just want progress in all aspects. But if you're not facing those things that you just mentioned, if you don't have the self-awareness to recognize the fact that, oh shit, I wasn't comfortable with that trade because I was over leveraged and I took too big of a lot size. So I closed in drawdown when I shouldn't have closed in drawdown because I wasn't comfortable seeing how much I was in drawdown. If you don't realize that it's because you were over leveraged, you didn't learn anything if you take your next trade and you're still over leveraged. But if you're journaling that and you're like, man, I shouldn't have taken that big lot size. Next time I'm going to cut it in half, but the entry was still good. I can see because I journaled it, it still played out. And if it didn't play out, whatever, I journaled that too. But I think you're always, and you should, if the people who don't identify that stuff that you just mentioned, I think those are the people that are just going in the circle.
Yeah.
They're not profitable. They don't know why. They're not consistent. They don't know why. They just keep trying. They just hope to take a trade every single day. They're just forcing stuff versus analyzing what they're doing, what's going on in the markets and how they're reacting to it.
Yeah. You have such the word that's coming to my mind, like just a rock solid mind. And
Thanks.
it feels like you are very disciplined. And I know that you mentioned you can't like pinpoint like what made you so disciplined. It's just something that's come over time. But I think it's really, really, really valuable to have a high level mind like yours ultimately in order to, I don't want to say you have to be this in order to see success, but it definitely, I know that that's attributing to the success that you're able to see. I want to know what your long-term vision is for this when it comes to trading and ultimately the life that it is you're looking to create with this skill set.
I mean, the life that I'm looking to create is ever changing. So even like last month, I just moved into a building that I've been manifesting to live in for the last 5 years here in Miami. So that was something that I didn't know was going to happen as soon as it did. I'm happy it did. But like I said, the law of exposure, I do everything I can to expose myself to what that next level is. And I just keep trying to attain it if that's what I want to attain. So when it comes to like the life that I'm trying to build, I want everyone around me to be comfortable. I want to be able to take care of everyone around me, you know, generally speaking, whatever that looks like when the time comes, right? As far as specifics, like, you know, everyone wants to retire their mom. Everyone wants to do stuff for their significant other, like all that. Those are obvious things, I think. Long-term in the industry, or I'd say the next 5 to 10 years, I'm looking to, I'm diving deeper and deeper in what I do now. So like currently I have a private community where we trade live together every day. And I'm actually been recruiting from that community, the profitable traders, and I'm opening a hedge fund next year. So I'm going deeper into this. I'm not the type of person that like wants to get good at trading and then go start investing in other businesses.
Okay.
Because like I said before, I know people who've been doing this for 20 years and they're billionaires.
Yeah.
So I'm like, why? Nothing else has the potential, in my opinion, to do this. But the way to scale faster is to take on larger sums from other investors. For me, in my perspective, I live in the perfect city and I know enough people that investors will come. So I'd want to, like, short story, 5 years, like next year I want to open my hedge fund. In 5 years, I want us to be managing $500 million, 500 million assets under management. That's right now the goal. I hope we crush that in 2 years and then we go further. But as of now, that's what I'm looking at.
That's amazing.
Thanks.
Yeah, and I'm sure when you first initially started, that was this what you saw yourself doing in terms of having these future visions, or has it definitely evolved and changed?
I think it's evolved.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't remember what my goals were when I first started. I think it was the short term, like I'm going to flip an account and go get a car and I'm going to do this. And now, it's like I said, the more I've been exposed to higher levels of what's possible, the more I speak to people who are worth billions,
Yeah.
and they're just trading. And I'm like, why would I get out of this?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think exposure is the one of the main key takeaways in terms of people in the top tier community have exposure to you, right? They have exposure to your mindset. They have exposure to the level of discipline and the passion. It was what it like. I'm just getting a lot of like dedicated energy into this one thing, and people have exposure to that, and I think is very, very valuable. And so if you're someone who is wanting to learn from Josh, you have the ability to do so because he is one of the coaches within the top tier community. And I'm just so grateful that I have the opportunity to not only be able to learn from you within the community, but also to have this in-person exposure, which is really, really key as well.
I do have one mistake that I just thought of as you were speaking.
Let's hear it. I knew you weren't perfect, Josh.
We got this one, and I hope this is valuable to people because you just mentioned the passion and the commitment and all of that stuff. The biggest mistake I've ever made, and this isn't necessarily in trading, the biggest mistake I've ever made in life is being distracted. It's not being focused. So now there was a time when I first moved to Miami, I've started 5-6 companies. When I first moved down here, I had a real estate property. I bought a triplex. I lived in one of the units and rented the other 2 out, so I was living mortgage free.
Okay.
I was doing that. I started an apparel company in fitness. I started a supplement company. I started an app for personal trainers. I started I opened the boxing gym. When I was a police officer, I was doing a police fitness YouTube channel. Like if you searched, the videos are gone now, so you can't find them. But if you were to search police fitness on YouTube, I was #1 ranking for police fitness, which was cool. And I was just trying all these things. And at one time, we had 3 companies that we were trying. I was like splitting my day up. Like, okay, 8 a.m. to 12, I'm working on this company. 1 p.m. to this, I'm working on. And long story short, I wasted a lot of money and got fucking nowhere. So now I've learned like my 20% focused on one thing is not going to beat somebody else's 100% focus on that thing. So I'm like relentlessly driven and like nothing can pull me away from what I'm doing. Someone has an idea, people hit me up with investments and strategies and whatever, anything, other business things. That's cool. I'll see you later. Good luck. And I just keep going. So yeah, if there's anything, like focus. Nice.
This has been such a great conversation.
Thanks.
And I really appreciate you taking the time to expose yourself to me so I can gain this valuable insight from you. And I know everyone who's tuning into this video as well will be able to say the same. And very fortunately, this is not the only place that you'll ever see Josh. You see him in our Discord community as well as showing up on Instagram and sharing the fundamentals for the week. So I really appreciate this conversation. Josh, let everyone know where they can find you.
Well, I mean, the top tier Discord for one, but I'm most active on Instagram. Josh, it's just my name, Josh_Pavao.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so
Awesome.
much.
Thank you.
If you found this interview as valuable as I have, make sure to let us know in the comments below. I want to know what the most key takeaway that you took away from this conversation with Josh. And don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Top Tier's YouTube channel so you have the ability to hear more from us in the future. So
Awesome. Thank you so much.
I appreciate it. Thank you.